A teenage black girl lay in her hospital bed after a car accident, enduring a prestigious doctor's increasingly hostile behavior. What started as cold remarks and rough treatment soon revealed something far more sinister. As the doctor's racist comments about her kind grew bolder, he had no idea that her father was a legendary biker whose reputation commanded respect across the city. When the doctor's prejudiced rant reached its peak, he failed to notice the imposing figure that had appeared in the doorway. Her father's next moves would erupt the hospital into chaos, ignite a fierce battle for justice, and expose an entire industry of racial discrimination and medical abuse. The evening sun bathed the sleek glass facade of the modern luxury house in a golden glow, its reflections shimmering like liquid light. The structure was a masterpiece of contemporary design, with clean lines, expansive windows, and a minimalist aesthetic that spoke of both wealth and refined taste. A sprawling driveway, bordered by meticulously trimmed hedges, led to the imposing automatic gate system that hummed softly as it stood sentinel, a quiet testament to the family's affluence and exclusivity. Inside the house, the vast open-concept interiors lay eerily quiet. The absence of her parents, the famous biker Adam Carter, away at a major event, and her mother, tied up in an out-of-town business trip, left an unsettling stillness that even the discreet presence of the household staff couldn't fill. The marble floors and designer furnishings gleamed under soft, recessed lighting, but the silence hung heavy, amplifying the contrast between privilege and isolation. 14-year-old Jovi Carter stood just beyond the entrance, her silhouette framed by the gentle glow of strategically placed outdoor lighting. Her carefully chosen outfit, a blend of trendy cuts and modest sophistication, fluttered slightly in the evening breeze as she anxiously smoothed it down, her excitement tempered by a touch of nerves. Her long hair, styled to perfection, caught the sunlight in waves, adding to the air of anticipation that surrounded her. As she waited for her date, Jovi couldn't help but found his mind wandered to her father. Adam Carter was a legend in the biker community, known for his imposing presence and unwavering loyalty to his crew. She smiled, remembering how he'd always make time for her, no matter how busy he was with his biker responsibilities. Tonight, though, she was on her own, and the thought both thrilled and unnerved her. The sound of an approaching car snapped Jovi out of her reverie. The automatic gate slid open smoothly as Ryan's car pulled into the circular foyer. Jovi's heart raced as she watched him emerge from one of his father's luxury vehicles. Ryan's arrival presented an image of careful preparation, his clothes perfectly pressed and his hair meticulously styled. "Hey, Jovi," Ryan called out, his voice carrying a practiced politeness. "You look great." Jovi blushed, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. "Thanks, Ryan. You too." As Ryan approached, he glanced around the expansive property. "So, are your parents home?" he inquired, his tone suggesting calculation rather than genuine interest. Jovi shook her head. "No, they're both out of town. Dad's at a big biker event and Mom's on a business trip." Something flickered in Ryan's eyes, but it was gone before Jovi could identify it. "Oh, that's too bad," he said, his voice neutral. "You know, since the house is empty, maybe we could just stay here instead of going out. We could watch movies or swim in the pool." Jovi frowned slightly, caught off guard by the suggestion. She had been looking forward to their dinner date all week. "I don't know, Ryan. I was really excited about trying that new restaurant downtown." Ryan's smile faltered for a moment before he recovered. "Come on, Jovi. It'll be more fun here. We'll have privacy and we can do whatever we want." There was something in his tone that made Jovi uncomfortable, though she couldn't quite put her finger on why. She pushed the feeling aside, chalking it up to first-date jitters. "I appreciate the offer, Ryan, but I'd really rather go out," Jovi said firmly. "I've been cooped up in this house all week and I'm ready for a change of scenery." Ryan's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly before he nodded, his charm back in full force. "Of course, whatever you want. Let's head out then." As they prepared to leave, Jovi called out to Maria, one of the waitstaff. "We're heading out now, Maria. I'll be back later tonight." Maria appeared in the foyer, her eyes darting between Jovi and Ryan. "Be careful, Miss Jovi, And call if you need anything, yes? Jovi nodded, touched by Maria's concern but eager to be on her way. As she stepped out into the warm evening air, she failed to notice the look of unease that crossed Maria's face. As Jovi settled into the passenger seat of Ryan's car, an unfamiliar odor immediately caught her attention. The strange smell permeated the car's interior, a mix of something sweet and pungent that she couldn't quite place. "What's that smell?" Jovi asked, wrinkling her nose. Ryan glanced at her, a flicker of nervousness crossing his face before he quickly masked it with a smooth smile. "Oh, it's probably just the new air freshener my dad put in," he said lightly. "You'll get used to it, I know. He has a weird sense of smell." They laughed together, the tension breaking for a moment as Jovi shook her head, her own nervousness dissipating slightly. "Well, I hope I can survive it," she teased, grinning at him. Ryan chuckled, glancing out the window as though eager to shift the focus of the conversation, though the flicker of unease in his expression lingered just beneath the surface. "Ready for our night?" he asked. Jovi nodded eagerly. She watched as Ryan took his position behind the wheel, noting how his movements seemed slightly exaggerated, almost theatrical. When he spoke, his words came out a bit slower than usual. As they pulled out of the driveway and onto the main road, Jovi was struck by how unusually sparse the evening traffic appeared. The empty streets created a deceptive sense of safety as they began their journey. "So, tell me more about this restaurant," Ryan said, his eyes darting between Jovi and the road. "What made you choose it?" Jovi launched into an enthusiastic description of the new fusion cuisine place she'd read about online. As she spoke, she failed to notice Ryan's increasing speed or the slight swerve in his driving. "Sounds great," Ryan said, his words slightly slurred. "But first, let me show you what this baby can do." Before Jovi could protest, Ryan accelerated dramatically. The sudden burst of speed pushed Jovi back into her seat, her heart racing with a mix of excitement and fear. "Ryan, slow down," she exclaimed, laughing nervously. "This isn't a racetrack." But Ryan only grinned, pressing the accelerator further. "Come on, Jovi, live a little. Don't you trust me?" As they sped down the highway, Ryan's driving grew more erratic with each passing moment. He weaved between lanes, narrowly avoiding other cars. Jovi, caught up in his charismatic display and their ongoing conversation, remained unaware of the mounting danger. "You know," Ryan said, his eyes leaving the road for dangerously long periods as he looked at Jovi, "you're not like other girls. You're cool, you know. You don't judge." Jovi blushed at the compliment, her teenage heart fluttering despite the growing unease in her stomach. "Thanks, Ryan. I just try to be myself, you know." Their casual chat and shared laughter created a fragile illusion of security, masking the mounting tension in the car. Ryan's foot pressed harder on the gas pedal, his speed increasing as they continued down the winding road. Jovi's smile faltered, her grip tightening on the seat as the car swerved sharply, the tires screeching against the pavement. This time the vehicle came alarmingly close to the guardrail, the metallic barrier flashing inches away from her window. The laughter died in her throat, replaced by a rising sense of panic. "Ryan, maybe slow down a bit," she said, her voice trembling slightly, though she tried to sound calm. Ryan's smile remained, but it no longer reached his eyes. "Relax," he said, his tone breezy, though the tension in his grip on the wheel betrayed him. "I've got this. Watch." With that, Ryan jerked the wheel sharply, attempting to weave between two cars, but his overconfidence betrayed him, and his reflexes failed. The car veered violently, narrowly missing a sedan but careening directly into the path of a looming heavy goods vehicle. Time seemed to stretch painfully for Jovi as the truck grew larger in the windshield, its massive grille filling her view. Her heart pounded in her chest, and she opened her mouth to scream, but no sound escaped. The world around her became a blur, her senses overwhelmed by the screech of tires and the deafening blast of the truck's horn. The impact was deafening. Metal crunched and glass shattered as the car collided with the truck before spinning off the road. The world became a dizzying blur of motion as the vehicle rolled multiple times, each impact feeling like an eternity to Jovi. When the car finally came to a stop, Jovi found herself hanging upside down, held in place by her seatbelt. Through the shattered windshield, she could see Ryan's body lying motionless on the ground several feet away. He had been ejected from the car during the crash, having neglected to wear his seatbelt. Jovi tried to move, to call out, but her body wouldn't respond. She could hear voices in the distance growing louder as a crowd began to gather around the accident scene. The last thing she registered before losing consciousness was the sound of sirens approaching and the blurry faces of strangers peering into the mangled wreckage, their attempts to help becoming a distant, fading memory. The harsh glare of fluorescent lights pierced through Jovi's eyelids, dragging her back to consciousness. The antiseptic smell of a hospital assaulted her senses as she found herself being rushed down a corridor on a stretcher. Voices buzzed around her, urgent and professional, but the words seemed to blend in a confusing jumble. Female, approximately 14 years old, involved in a high-speed MVA, a voice called out. Multiple contusions, possible internal injuries. BP is 90/60 and dropping. Jovi tried to speak, to ask what was happening, but her voice came out as a weak croak. A gentle hand touched her arm, and she turned to see a nurse leaning over her. "You're in the hospital, sweetheart," the nurse explained softly. "You've been in a car accident. We're going to take good care of you, okay?" As they wheeled her into an emergency room, Jovi's mind raced. The accident, Ryan, oh, where was he? Was he okay? She wanted to ask, but the words wouldn't come. The next few hours passed in a blur of tests, examinations, and questions. Doctors and nurses swarmed around her, their faces blending together as they poked and prodded. Through it all, Jovi kept hearing snippets of conversation, always circling back to one frustrating point. Has anyone been able to reach her parents? No luck so far. Father's at some biker event, mother's on a business trip. We'll keep trying. Finally, as the initial flurry of activity began to die down, a nurse with kind eyes and a gentle demeanor approached Jovi's bedside. Her name tag read Nancy. "Hello, Jovi," Nurse Nancy said, her voice warm and comforting. "I'm going to be taking care of you for a while. How are you feeling?" Jovi swallowed hard, her throat dry and scratchy. I don't know. Everything hurts. Where's Ryan? Is he okay?" Nancy's expression softened, a flicker of concern passing over her features. She glanced at her colleagues, who nodded almost imperceptibly. He's in critical condition, sweetheart," Nancy said gently. "He has multiple broken bones and some internal wounds. The doctors are doing everything they can for him." Jovi's eyes filled with tears. "But he'll be okay, right? He has to be okay." Nancy took Jovi's hand, squeezing it gently. "We're doing our best for him, just like we're doing our best for you. But Jovi, there's something else you need to know. The tests showed that Ryan had been using marijuana before the accident. He was driving under the influence." The words hit Jovi like a physical blow. She shook her head vehemently, wincing at the pain the movement caused. "No, that's impossible. Ryan doesn't do drugs. He couldn't." "I'm so sorry, sweetie," Nancy said, her voice filled with compassion. "I know this must be a shock." Jovi's mind reeled. The strange smell in the car, Ryan's erratic behavior, it all started to make a horrible kind of sense. How could she have been so blind? As Jovi processed this devastating information, Nancy leaned in closer, her voice dropping to a hushed tone. "Jovi, listen to me. The police are going to want to talk to you soon. They're going to ask you questions about what happened tonight. It's very important that you tell them the truth, okay? Just tell them exactly what you remember." Jovi nodded numbly, still struggling to come to terms with the reality of the situation. Nancy squeezed her hand one more time before stepping away to speak with another nurse at the station. "Any luck reaching the father?" Nancy asked in a low voice. The other nurse shook her head. "Not yet. We've been trying the number on file, but it keeps going to voicemail." Nancy leaned back toward Jovi, her expression gentle but serious. "Sweetie, do you have your dad's contact information? We've been trying to reach him through the number we have in our system, but it's not going through. It keeps going to voicemail." Jovi blinked, her mind struggling to catch up. "It's probably his old number," she mumbled, her voice barely audible. He changed it a while ago. Nancy nodded patiently. Do you have the new number? It's really important we get in touch with him. We need a parent here to help with everything. Jovi hesitated for a moment before reciting the new number. Nancy quickly jotted it down, her tone softening. Thank you, Jovi. We'll call him right away. She stepped away, handing the number to another nurse. Try this one, Nancy instructed. It's the number Jovi just gave me. Let's hope we can reach him this time. She needs someone here, and fast. The nurse nodded and dialed, her fingers moving swiftly as the urgency of the moment hung in the air. As the nurses huddled around the phone, making another attempt to reach Adam Carter, Jovi lay in her bed staring at the ceiling. The weight of the evening's events pressed down on her, leaving her feeling more alone and scared than she'd ever felt in her life. She closed her eyes, silently willing her father to come, to make everything okay again. After what felt like endless hours of waiting, Jovi's gaze remained fixed on the cold tile floor, her mind adrift in a sea of anxious thoughts. Finally, a shift in the atmosphere caught her attention. Nurse Nancy approached her, her expression warm but focused. Jovi, she said gently, crouching slightly to meet the girl's eyes. We're going to move you to a room now. The doctors want to keep you overnight for observation, just to make sure everything's okay. Jovi nodded wordlessly, her body too drained to respond. Nancy signaled to an orderly who rolled a wheelchair closer. Here we go, sweetheart, she said softly, helping Jovi into the chair with careful hands. As the wheelchair began to move, Jovi let herself lean back, the quiet hum of the hospital wheels accompanying her down the long corridor. For the first time in what felt like forever, there was a change, a small sense of forward motion amidst the overwhelming stillness of the night. The journey from the waiting area to her room had felt like a blur, a strange blend of exhaustion and relief. Now, nestled in the hospital bed, the rhythmic beeping of medical equipment filled the air as Jovi fought to stay conscious, her body heavy with fatigue and the lingering effects of the pain medication. She wasn't sure how long she had been lying there when a gentle knock on the doorframe pulled her from her haze. She blinked, her vision slowly sharpening to reveal Nurse Nancy standing in the doorway, a clipboard in hand and a kind expression on her face. Hi, Jovi, Nancy said softly, her voice warm but tinged with concern. How are you feeling? Jovi shifted slightly, her body protesting the movement. I'm okay, I guess, she murmured, her voice hoarse and unsteady. Everything feels heavy. As she spoke, Nancy adjusted the IV fluids with practiced ease, her tone steady but kind. Once satisfied, she turned back to Jovi. There's something else, sweetie, she said softly, hesitant to disrupt the fragile calm. The police are outside and they'd like to speak with you when you're ready. It's about the accident. Jovi's chest tightened at the mention of the police, her heart pounding beneath the weight of everything she'd been trying to process. She stared at Nancy, searching for reassurance in her face. Do I have to? She whispered, her voice shaky. Nancy placed a comforting hand on Jovi's arm. It's important, Jovi, she said gently, her eyes meeting the girl's. But you're not alone. I'll be here if you need me, and you don't have to answer anything you're not comfortable with. Just tell them the truth about what happened. They only want to help. Jovi nodded faintly, her nerves still raw but soothed slightly by Nancy's words. She took a deep breath, bracing herself for the conversation ahead. 2 police officers entered the room, their expressions a careful blend of professionalism and concern. The older of the two, a man with salt and pepper hair and kind eyes, approached Jovi's bedside. Hello, Jovi, he said, his voice low and soothing. I'm Officer Martinez, and this is my partner, Officer Chen. We'd like to ask you a few questions about what happened tonight, if you're feeling up to it. Jovi nodded weakly, Nurse Nancy's words echoing in her mind. Tell the truth, just tell them what you remember. Sir? Can you walk us through the events leading up to the accident? Officer Martinez asked, pulling out a small notebook. Jovi took a deep breath, wincing slightly at the pain in her ribs. Ryan picked me up at my house. We were supposed to go to dinner, but... She paused, the memory of Ryan's suggestion to stay at her house suddenly taking on a sinister tone in light of what she now knew. but I insisted we go out. We got in his car and started driving. Did you notice anything unusual about Ryan's behavior? Officer Chen interjected, her pen poised over her own notebook. Jovi hesitated, tears welling up in her eyes. He was driving really fast. I thought he was just showing off. There was a weird smell in the car, but he said it was a new air freshener. I didn't know. Her voice broke, and Officer Martinez placed a comforting hand on her arm. It's okay, Jovi. Take your time. After a moment, Jovi continued, recounting the terrifying moments leading up to the crash. As she spoke, she could see the officers exchanging glances, their expressions growing more serious. Jovi, Officer Chen said gently when she had finished, were you aware that Ryan had been using marijuana before picking you up? No, Jovi exclaimed, her voice rising with emotion. I swear I had no idea. I would never have gotten in the car if I'd known. I don't do drugs. The officers nodded, jotting down notes. We believe you, Jovi, Officer Martinez assured her. We just need to get all the facts straight. As the officers prepared to leave, promising to return if they had any more questions, a new figure appeared in the doorway. Dr. Richard Callaway strode into the room, his white coat crisp and his manner brusque. I'm Dr. Callaway, he announced, barely glancing at the officers and nurses as they exited. I'll be overseeing your care, Miss Carter. We need to run a few more tests to ensure you haven't been exposed to any substances and your statement is true. Jovi's brow furrowed in confusion. But I told the police I didn't take anything. I don't do drugs. Dr. Callaway's lips thinned into a tight smile that didn't reach his eyes. Standard procedure, I'm afraid. We need to be thorough. As the doctor began preparing for the tests, Jovi couldn't shake a growing sense of unease. There was something in Dr. Callaway's manner, a coldness that seemed at odds with his role as a healer. The examination began routinely enough, with Dr. Callaway checking her vitals and asking standard medical questions. But as he moved to draw blood, his demeanor shifted subtly. His touch became rougher, his movements less careful. Ow! Jovi exclaimed, as the needle jabbed into her arm with unnecessary force. Hold still, Dr. Callaway snapped, his voice laden with irritation. This wouldn't hurt if you weren't squirming so much. As he worked, Dr. Callaway began to mutter under his breath, his words becoming clearer and more disturbing with each passing moment. Always the same with you people, he grumbled. Young black teenagers thinking they're invincible. Do you know how many of you end up in my ER every weekend? Jovi's eyes widened in shock at the blatant racism in his words. Excuse me, she said, her voice trembling with a mix of fear and indignation. Dr. Callaway's gaze snapped to her face, his eyes cold. Oh, did I offend you? Well, statistics don't lie, young lady. Your kind are always causing trouble, always a drain on our resources. Tears sprang to Jovi's eyes, but she fought them back, refusing to let this man see her cry. That's not true, she said, her voice stronger now. And you can't talk to me like that. I want another doctor. A cruel smile twisted Dr. Callaway's lips. Oh, you want special treatment now? Well, let me tell you something, girl. You're stuck with me, and I'm going to make sure we find out exactly what you've been up to tonight. With that, he pressed down hard on the injection site, causing Jovi to cry out in pain. The doctor's smile widened at her distress, a look of satisfaction crossing his face. Suddenly, the door burst open and Adam Carter's imposing figure filled the doorway of Jovi's room, his large, muscular frame a stark contrast to the sterile hospital environment. His face, usually set in the stern expression that had made him a legend in the biker community, was etched with worry and barely contained fury. He arrived just in time to catch the tail end of Dr. Callaway's racist tirade. And frankly, it's no surprise. Your kind always... Dr. Callaway's words died in his throat as he turned and found himself face to face with Adam Carter. The change in the doctor's demeanor was instantaneous. The smug superiority melted away, replaced by a look of barely concealed fear. He recognized Adam immediately. The famous biker's reputation preceded him, and the doctor suddenly realized he had made a grave miscalculation. What exactly do you mean by your kind, doctor? Adam's voice was low and dangerous, each word carefully enunciated. Dr. Callaway took an involuntary step back, his Adam's apple bobbing as he swallowed hard. "Mr. Carter, I was just explaining to your daughter about the, statistical likelihood of—" "Dad!" Jovi's voice, filled with relief and a hint of tears, cut through the tension. "Dad, he's been horrible. He hurt me during the tests, and he kept saying awful things about black people and—" Adam's eyes, already blazing with anger, now looked capable of burning a hole through Dr. Callaway's skull. "Is that right, Doctor? You've been mistreating my daughter and spouting racist garbage?" Dr. Callaway's survival instincts kicked in, and he quickly shifted tactics. Instead of answering Adam directly, he raised his voice in a panic, shouting, "Help! Security! I'm being threatened!" As he yelled, the doctor's hand snaked out to press the emergency button near Jovi's bed. The sudden blare of alarms added to the chaos of the moment. But Dr. Callaway wasn't done. In a move that would prove to be his undoing, he decided to double down on his provocation. "This is exactly what I'd expect from a black biker," he sneered, his fear momentarily overridden by his deep-seated prejudice. "Violence is always your first response, isn't it?" It was the last straw. Adam, unable to contain his rage at the blatant racism and his daughter's mistreatment, reacted on instinct. His fist connected with Dr. Callaway's jaw with a sickening crack, sending the doctor sprawling to the floor. The room erupted into chaos. Nurses, including Nancy, rushed in, responding to the emergency call. Dr. Callaway, now playing the victim to perfection, cowered on the floor, holding his jaw and moaning dramatically. "He attacked me," the doctor wailed, pointing a shaking finger at Adam. "Unprovoked assault. Call the police." Security guards appeared in the doorway, their faces a mix of confusion and determination as they tried to assess the situation. Despite the significant size difference between Adam and the guards, they moved to restrain him, urged on by Dr. Callaway's continued cries for help. "No," Jovi shouted, her voice rising above the din. "You don't understand. The doctor was hurting me. He was saying horrible things. Dad was just protecting me." But her protests seemed to fall on deaf ears as the security guards grappled with Adam, trying to force him out of the room. Dr. Callaway, seeing his chance, quickly got to his feet and began to spin his version of events. "This man burst in here and attacked me without provocation," he said, his voice dripping with false sincerity. "And I'm afraid his daughter isn't a reliable witness. Given the nature of her accident and the substances likely involved, her perception may be impaired." "That's a lie," Jovi cried out, struggling to sit up in her bed. "I didn't take anything. You're the one who's lying." Nurse Nancy, who had been observing the scene with growing concern, found herself torn. Her professional obligation to support her colleague warred with her instincts about the situation. She had seen firsthand how clear-headed and coherent Jovi had been upon admission, a stark contrast to Dr. Callaway's insinuations. As the situation escalated, Nurse Nancy observed the scene with visible conflict, her professional obligation to support her colleague warring with her instincts about the situation. Despite her growing suspicions, she felt compelled to maintain a facade of professionalism. "Dr. Callaway," Nancy interjected, her voice steady despite her inner turmoil, "perhaps I should take the blood sample to the lab. It would allow you to focus on the situation here." Dr. Callaway's eyes darted to Nancy, a flash of suspicion crossing his face before he smoothed it into a practiced smile. "That won't be necessary, nurse," he said, his tone leaving no room for argument. "I prefer to handle this personally, you understand, given the delicate nature of the situation." Nancy nodded, her unease growing but unable to voice her concerns in front of the gathered crowd. She watched helplessly as security continued to grapple with Adam, his desperate shouts defending his father echoing through the corridor. Dr. Callaway, seizing the opportunity to further discredit Jovi, raised his voice to be heard over the commotion. "As you can see, the girl is clearly distraught and confused. It's likely a side effect of the drugs in her system." "That's a lie," Jovi cried out, her voice hoarse with emotion. "I didn't take anything. Please, you have to believe me." But Dr. Callaway had already turned away, clutching the blood sample tightly as he strode purposefully down the corridor. Nancy watched him go, a sinking feeling in her stomach as she realized the doctor was bypassing the usual protocols for handling patient samples. As the chaos continued around her, Nancy made a silent vow to keep a closer eye on both Dr. Callaway and Jovi's case. Something wasn't right, and despite the professional risks, she knew she couldn't stand idly by if a patient was being mistreated. The scene at Jovi's room devolved into further chaos as Adam was forcibly removed, his daughter's pleas and his desperate shouts echoing down the corridor. Adam could feel the firm grip of the security guards on his arms, their combined strength barely enough to guide him toward the hospital exits. The scene was chaotic, the tension palpable. Adam Carter, a towering figure whose imposing presence dwarfed the guards flanking him, stood in a heated argument with the head of security. His rugged face was flushed with anger and desperation, his biker tattoos visible beneath the sleeves of his leather jacket, which was half pulled off in the scuffle. A growing crowd had gathered just beyond the automatic doors, drawn by the commotion. Many held their phones aloft, recording the confrontation involving the legendary biker, the flash of cameras intermittently lighting the scene. Murmurs rippled through the onlookers, speculation and judgment flowing freely. "You don't understand," Adam shouted, his voice hoarse but unwavering, carrying over the cacophony. His eyes blazed with intensity as he resisted being dragged away. "That doctor in there, he's racist. He was mistreating my daughter. I was protecting her." The head of security, a stern-faced man in his 50s, held up a placating hand. "Mr. Carter, I understand you're upset, but we have protocols we need to follow. Dr. Callaway is a respected member of our staff, and he's claiming you assaulted him unprovoked." Adam's face contorted in frustration. "Unprovoked? Did you not hear what I just said? He was hurting my little girl." "Mr. Carter, we understand your concerns, but this isn't the way to handle it," he said firmly, his voice almost drowned out by the crowd. "You're causing a scene. Let us handle this through proper channels." Adam's muscles tensed, his frustration boiling over. "A scene?" he barked. "I'd cause 1,000 scenes if it meant keeping my daughter safe." The crowd murmured louder, the lines between support and skepticism blurring. Adam's desperation was evident, but so too was the strain in the guards' faces as they tried to diffuse the situation. As the argument continued, a younger security guard, a black man named Marcus, stepped closer. His expression was conflicted, torn between his duty and his understanding of the racial dynamics at play. "Sir," Marcus said quietly, addressing Adam, "I hear what you're saying, I do. But you have to understand, throwing the first punch, that's always going to be a problem, no matter the provocation." Adam turned to Marcus, a glimmer of hope in his eyes at finding someone who might understand. "So what? I was just supposed to stand there and let him abuse my daughter, let him spew his racist garbage?" Marcus sighed, his discomfort evident. "I'm not saying it's right, sir, but the system, it doesn't always work in our favor. You've got to be smart about how you fight these battles." The tension in the air was palpable, as Adam struggled with the injustice of the situation. Just as it seemed the confrontation might de-escalate, a new voice cut through the murmur of the crowd. Well, if it isn't the violent biker still causing trouble." Dr. Callaway emerged from the hospital doors, his smug smile barely concealing the bruise forming on his jaw. He sauntered towards the group, his every movement calculated to provoke. "I hope you're proud of yourself, Mr. Carter," the doctor sneered. "Assaulting a physician, traumatizing the hospital staff, and all to defend your delinquent daughter." Adam's muscles tensed, his fists clenching at his sides. "You watch your mouth when you talk about my daughter," he growled. Dr. Callaway's smile widened, a predatory glint in his eyes as he leaned in slightly. "Oh, touched a nerve, have I?" he said smoothly, his tone laced with venom. "Well, it's no wonder your daughter is trouble." Adam's fists clenched at his sides, his body taut with barely restrained fury. The doctor's words echoed in his ears, each one a deliberate strike meant to provoke him. Dr. Callaway sneered, his voice dripping with disdain. "Her own father can't even respect authority. You people can't seem to stay far from trouble, can you?" The doctor's words hung in the air for a moment, their calculated cruelty sinking in. Then, with a roar of rage, Adam lunged forward. It took 3 security guards to restrain him, pinning him to the ground as he struggled to get at Dr. Callaway. The doctor's face was a mask of false terror as he stumbled backward, playing the victim to perfection. "You see?" he cried out to the gathering crowd. "This is exactly what I mean. Violence is in their nature." As Adam was forcibly restrained, Dr. Callaway pulled out his phone, his voice dripping with false concern as he dialed. "Yes, police? This is Dr. Richard Callaway at Metro General. I need to report an assault." The crowd watched in stunned silence as the scene unfolded, many still recording on their phones. The injustice of the situation was clear to some, while others muttered about typical biker behavior. The sound of sirens soon cut through the air. Police cars pulled up to the hospital entrance, their lights flashing in the early morning darkness. Officers quickly surrounded Adam, their hands on their weapons as they assessed the situation. "Sir, please step back and put your hands where we can see them," one officer commanded. Adam's muscles tensed, his instinct to fight warring with his better judgment. He glanced around, seeing the crowd of onlookers with their phones out, recording every moment of the confrontation. Marcus, the black security guard who had tried to de-escalate earlier, stepped forward cautiously. "Mr. Carter," he said in a low, urgent voice, "don't fight them. It won't end well if they have to cuff you. Think about your daughter." Adam's eyes met Marcus's, seeing the genuine concern there. He took a deep breath, forcing his fists to unclench. "All right," he said, his voice rough with suppressed emotion. "I can walk. No need for handcuffs." The officers exchanged glances, then nodded. "Okay, sir, please come with us." As Adam was led to the police car, he could see Dr. Callaway watching from the hospital entrance, a triumphant, smug smile playing on his lips. Adam's jaw clenched, but he kept walking, Marcus's words echoing in his mind. "This isn't over," Adam muttered as he ducked into the back of the police car. "I'm coming back for you, Jovi, I promise." The car door slammed shut, and Adam watched through the window as the hospital and his daughter receded into the distance. The drive to the police station was tense and silent, Adam's mind racing with worry for Jovi and determination to expose the truth. As the city streets gave way to the stark facade of the police station, Adam steeled himself for what was to come. He knew the fight was far from over, but for now he had to play by their rules, at least until he could figure out his next move. The police car came to a stop, and as the officers opened the door to lead him inside, Adam took a deep breath. Whatever happened next, he wouldn't rest until justice was served and his daughter was safe. The harsh fluorescent lights of the police station cast an unflattering glow over Adam Carter's face as he sat in the holding area, his large frame looking oddly vulnerable in the sterile environment. The famous biker's usual air of intimidation was replaced by a palpable sense of worry and frustration. Officer Jenkins, a veteran cop who had seen it all, approached Adam with a clipboard in hand. "All right, Mr. Carter, we're processing your assault charges now. You get 1 phone call, make it count." Adam nodded grimly, his mind racing. He knew he needed help, not just for himself, but more importantly for Jovi. He dialed a number from memory, praying his old friend would pick up. "Bones, it's Adam. I'm in trouble, brother. I'm at the police station. Yes, the one near Metro General. I need your help, and I need a lawyer, a good one." The conversation was brief, but by the end Adam felt a small measure of relief. Help was on the way. Now all he could do was wait and worry about Jovi. As the minutes ticked by, Adam's agitation grew. He paced the small holding area, his mind replaying the events at the hospital over and over. Every time he thought of Dr. Callaway's smug face and racist comments, his fists clenched involuntarily. "Officer," Adam called out, his voice tight with barely contained emotion. "My daughter, she's still at that hospital with that bastard doctor. You've got to do something. She's not safe there." Officer Jenkins looked up from his paperwork, his expression a mix of sympathy and resignation. "Mr. Carter, I understand you're worried, but Dr. Callaway is a respected physician. I'm sure your daughter is receiving the best care possible." Adam slammed his hand against the wall, the sharp crack reverberating through the corridor. Several officers looked up in alarm, their hands twitching toward their radios. His voice, raw with anger and desperation, filled the tense air. "You don't understand," Adam bellowed, his chest heaving. "That man is racist. I saw the way he stabbed the syringe into her arm, like she didn't even matter. He was saying horrible things to her. You can't just leave her there with him." Before Officer Jenkins could respond, the station door opened and another officer walked in, looking harried. "Jenkins, you handling the Carter case? I just got back from the hospital. Things are a mess over there." Jenkins nodded, gesturing for his colleague to continue. Adam strained to hear their conversation, his heart racing. "Well, I was talking to the staff about the accident case. You know, the two teenagers. Anyway, they were discussing the girl's lab results. Apparently her drug levels were off the charts." The words hit Adam like a physical blow. He stumbled back, shaking his head in disbelief. "No," he muttered. "No, that's impossible. Jovi doesn't do drugs. She wouldn't." Officer Jenkins turned to Adam, his expression now one of suspicion. "Mr. Carter, is there something you're not telling us about your daughter's habits?" Adam's face flushed with anger. "My daughter is not a drug user. She's a good kid, always has been a homey girl. This is all wrong. I want to see that report." To Adam's surprise, Officer Jenkins nodded after a moment's consideration. "All right, Mr. Carter. I'll get you a copy of the report. But I warn you, if there's evidence your daughter was involved in drug use, it could complicate matters significantly." As Adam waited for the report, his mind raced. He knew Jovi better than anyone. She was sweet, naive even. The idea of her using drugs was so far removed from reality that it bordered on the absurd. Something wasn't adding up. When Officer Jenkins returned with the lab report, Adam snatched it from his hands, his eyes scanning the document frantically. The numbers meant little to him, but the conclusion was clear. According to this report, Jovi had high levels of multiple drugs in her system. But as Adam stared at the document, something caught his eye. At the bottom of the report, prominently displayed, was Dr. Callaway's signature. In that moment, everything clicked into place. The doctor's behavior, his eagerness to paint Jovi as a troublemaker, the suspicious lab results. It all pointed to a sinister plot. "This is fake," Adam said, his voice low and dangerous. "That bastard doctor, he's framing my daughter. He's trying to cover something up." Officer Jenkins looked skeptical. "That's a serious accusation, Mr. Carter. Dr. Callaway is a respected—" "I don't give a damn about his reputation," Adam roared, causing everyone in the station to jump. "My daughter is in danger, and I'm sitting here while that racist psychopath has free rein to hurt her." Just then, the station door opened again and a man in an expensive suit walked in, flanked by two intimidating bikers. "Adam Carter," the man called out. "I'm Attorney James Reeves. Your friend Bones sent me. Let's talk about getting you out of here." As the lawyer approached, Adam felt a glimmer of hope. He knew now that this was bigger than just an assault charge. There was a conspiracy at play, and his daughter was at the center of it. With renewed determination, Adam turned to his lawyer. "Get me out of here," he said, his voice filled with urgency. "We've got work to do. My daughter's life depends on it." The legal wheels turned swiftly once Adam's lawyer arrived at the police station. After a tense hour of negotiations and paperwork, Adam found himself released with a stern warning. The sun was just beginning to rise as he emerged from the station, his mind already racing with plans to uncover the truth and protect his daughter. Without wasting a moment, Adam headed straight back to the hospital. The early morning traffic was light, allowing him to make good time. As he pulled into the hospital parking lot, he steeled himself for what lay ahead. The battle was far from over, but now, armed with his suspicions and determination, he was ready to fight back against the injustice threatening his daughter's life. The hospital corridors seemed different to Adam as he strode through them, his footsteps echoing with purpose. The events of the past few hours had transformed the once sterile environment into a battlefield, with his daughter's well-being as the prize. As he approached Jovi's room, Adam was met with a new obstacle. Two burly security guards stationed outside the door, their faces set in grim determination. "I'm sorry, Mr. Carter," one of the guards said firmly, holding up a hand to stop Adam's advance. "We have strict orders not to let you in. Doctor's orders." Adam's jaw tightened, his hands balling into fists at his sides. He opened his mouth to argue, his frustration boiling over. But before he could speak, he felt a steady hand on his shoulder. He turned to see James Reeves, his lawyer, standing beside him. "Let me handle this," Reeves said calmly, his tone low and controlled. He stepped forward, addressing the guards with a disarming smile. "Gentlemen, I'm Mr. Carter's attorney. I believe you'll find that denying a parent access to their minor child constitutes a violation of several statutes. Now we can escalate this to hospital administration and possibly beyond, or you can step aside and grant my client a brief visit with his daughter. Isn't that right, Mr. Carter?" Adam's shoulders relaxed slightly, though his voice remained gruff as he answered, the weight of the moment pressing heavily on him. "Yes," he said, his words slow and deliberate. "Just a short visit." Reeves nodded reassuringly, turning back to the guards with a pointed look. "Well, what's it going to be?" The guards exchanged uncertain glances before reluctantly stepping aside. As Adam entered the room, his heart sank. Jovi's condition had visibly deteriorated since he'd last seen her. Her skin was pale, almost ashen, and her breathing seemed labored. The various machines surrounding her bed beeped and whirred ominously. "Jovi, baby," Adam whispered, rushing to her side. "What have they done to you?" Jovi's eyes fluttered open, a weak smile crossing her face as she recognized her father. "Dad," she murmured, her voice barely audible. "You came back." Adam took her hand, careful not to disturb the IV lines. "Of course I came back, sweetheart. I'm so sorry I left you. But I'm here now and I'm going to fix this, I promise." "I didn't use any drugs, Dad. You have to believe me. It's not like that, they said. I don't know why they would do that to me." Adam hushed Jovi gently, his fingers brushing through her hair in soothing strokes until she drifted back into a restless sleep. Her pale face and the dramatic change in her condition since his forced departure gnawed at him, each shallow breath stoking the fire of his growing suspicions. Dr. Callaway's name loomed large in his thoughts, the man's cold demeanor and earlier insults replaying like a haunting refrain. Something wasn't right. Adam could feel it in his gut. He needed answers, and he needed them fast. Whatever was happening to his daughter, he vowed silently, he would get to the bottom of it. Stepping out into the hallway, Adam spotted a familiar face, Nurse Nancy. She looked up as he approached, her expression a mix of relief and concern. "Mr. Carter," she said in a hushed tone, glancing around to ensure they weren't overheard. "I'm glad you're back. I've been worried about Jovi." Adam leaned in close. "Nurse Nancy, I need your help. Something's not right here. Jovi's condition has gotten worse." Nancy's face paled slightly, but she nodded, her voice low and cautious. "I've had my suspicions too, Mr. Carter. When Jovi was first admitted, she was clear-headed and showed no signs of drug use. I would have noticed." "And Jovi's lab results?" Adam asked. "They're saying she had drugs in her system, but I know that's not true." She hesitated, glancing around to ensure no one was listening before continuing. "Yes, I can confirm that her lab report came back positive for marijuana use. The hospital laboratory documents are official, and without solid proof to the contrary, it's hard to challenge their findings." Her expression was a mix of worry and resignation as she added, "I know this might not sit right with you, but without evidence we don't have much ground to stand on." This confirmation of his suspicions only heightened Adam's sense of urgency. "I need to see Ryan," he said suddenly. "The boy who was in the car with Jovi, where is he?" Nancy's face showed conflict as she hesitated. "I'm sorry, Mr. Carter," she said, her voice tinged with regret, "but I can't disclose that information. Patient privacy policies prevent me from sharing details about other patients, even room numbers with non-family members." Adam nodded, understanding but frustrated. He thanked Nancy and moved away, his mind working on a new plan. He waited patiently, watching the nurses station from a distance. When a code blue was called in another wing, drawing the staff away, Adam saw his opportunity. Quickly and quietly, he slipped behind the desk. His eyes scanned the computer screen, searching for Ryan's information. Suddenly, his breath caught in his throat. There on the screen was the patient's full name, Ryan Callaway. In that moment, everything clicked into place. Ryan was Dr. Richard Callaway's son. The doctor's vengeful behavior, his personal stake in the situation, it all made sense now. Adam's mind raced with the implications of this discovery. After a moment of stunned realization, Adam refocused on his task. He noted Ryan's room number, 301, in the VIP wing, and quietly slipped away from the station. With this new information, Adam made his way to the VIP wing. The contrast between this area and the regular hospital rooms was stark. Plush carpets, soft lighting, and an air of exclusivity. As Adam approached room 301, he noticed the door was slightly ajar. Peering inside, he saw a young man, Ryan, lying in a bed 3 times the size of Jovi's. The room was filled with expensive equipment and comfortable furniture for visitors. Adam's eyes narrowed as he scanned the room, taking in every detail. On a nearby table, he spotted Ryan's medical chart. Glancing around to ensure he wasn't observed, Adam quickly entered the room and grabbed the chart. As he flipped through the pages, his suspicions were confirmed. Ryan's toxicology report showed high levels of marijuana in his system at the time of the accident. But unlike Jovi's falsified report, this one bore the signatures of multiple lab technicians and doctors, everyone except Dr. Callaway. The pieces were starting to fall into place, but Adam knew he needed more evidence. He pulled out his phone and quickly snapped photos of the relevant pages in Ryan's chart. Just as he was replacing the chart, a noise in the hallway made him freeze. Footsteps were approaching. Adam looked around frantically for a place to hide, but the spacious room offered few options. As the footsteps grew louder, Adam made a split-second decision. He slipped behind the large privacy curtain surrounding Ryan's bed, holding his breath as the door opened fully. "And as you can see, Senator, we spare no expense for our VIP patients," came Dr. Callaway's oily voice. "Your son is receiving the very best care our hospital has to offer." Adam's eyes widened in surprise. "Senator?" He peered through a small gap in the curtain to see Dr. Callaway leading an older man in an expensive suit into the room. "I appreciate that, Richard," the man, presumably Senator Callaway, replied. "But I'm more concerned about the legal implications of this mess. You're sure the Carter girls' test results will hold up under scrutiny?" Dr. Callaway's face twisted into a smug smile. "Absolutely, Senator. I personally oversaw the, adjustments to her lab work. As far as anyone knows, she was the one who drugged Ryan and caused the accident. Your son's reputation is safe." Adam's blood boiled as he listened to the 2 men casually discuss framing his daughter. It took every ounce of self-control he possessed not to burst out from behind the curtain and confront them. Good, Senator Callaway nodded. "And what about the father? I heard there was some trouble earlier." Dr. Callaway waved a dismissive hand. "A minor setback. The biker trash lost his temper and assaulted me. He's been dealt with. By the time this is over, both he and his daughter will be thoroughly discredited." As the 2 men continued their conversation, Adam's mind raced. He now had proof of the conspiracy against Jovi, but he knew it wouldn't be enough. He needed hard evidence of Dr. Callaway's tampering with the lab results. When the doctor and the senator finally left the room, Adam emerged from his hiding place, his face set with grim determination. He had a plan forming, but he knew he'd need help to pull it off. Quietly slipping out of Ryan's room after both the Callaway had left, Adam made his way back to the nurse's station where Nancy was working. "Nancy," he said in a low, urgent voice, "I need your help. We're going to expose Dr. Callaway and save my daughter. Are you with me?" Adam's hands trembled as he relayed everything he had overheard and seen in Ryan's room to Nancy. His voice was low but filled with urgency, each word laced with anger and disbelief. "They're setting her up, Nancy," he said, his jaw clenched. "They altered her lab results, that bastard Dr. Callaway. It's a complete setup." Nancy's face paled as Adam's words sank in. She shook her head, her expression one of shock and disbelief. That can't be true," she stammered. "I know Dr. Callaway has a reputation for being ruthless, but tampering with medical records, framing a child, that's criminal." "It's not just criminal, it's monstrous," Adam snapped, his voice rising. "They're destroying her life to save his. And you heard what they're doing with the lab reports. It's not a mistake, it's deliberate. They're manipulating everything." Nancy looked up at Adam, conflict clear in her eyes. She knew helping him could jeopardize her job, maybe even her career. But as she thought about Jovi, about the clear injustice being perpetrated, she made her decision. "What do you need me to do?" she asked, her voice steady with resolve. Adam leaned in close, outlining his plan in hushed tones. As he spoke, Nancy's eyes widened, but she nodded along, her determination growing with each word. "It's risky," she said when he finished, "but if it works, we'll have the proof we need to bring Dr. Callaway down and clear Jovi's name." Adam nodded grimly. "It has to work. My girl's life depends on it." The hospital's night shift was in full swing, the corridors quieter but still humming with the constant activity of a busy medical center. Nancy glanced around quickly to ensure no one was watching too closely. "I can access the system, but we need to be quick," she whispered. Adam positioned himself to block the view of the computer screen from anyone passing by. Nancy's fingers flew over the keyboard, navigating through the hospital's database with practiced ease. "Here it is," Nancy murmured, her eyes scanning the screen. "Ryan's complete file, including the original lab reports." Without hesitation, Nancy inserted a USB drive into the computer and began downloading the files. The seconds ticked by agonizingly slowly as they both watched the progress bar inch forward. "This is it," Adam said, his voice low and intense as Nancy pulled the USB from the computer and handed it to him. "The original toxicology reports for Ryan show high levels of marijuana and traces of other drugs. But the altered report, it paints him clean and Jovi as the sole drug user, with medically improbable levels." Nancy's face paled as she compared the reports. "This is tampering. Dr. Callaway has gone too far." "This is the proof we need to bring that bastard down," Adam growled, his fists clenching at his sides. But their victory was short-lived. Just as they were finishing their review of the documents, Dr. Callaway appeared in the corridor by the nurse station, his face contorted with rage. "What do you think you're doing?" he snarled, his eyes darting between Adam and Nancy. "You have no right to access those records." Adam stepped forward, placing himself between the doctor and Nancy. "We have every right to expose your lies, Callaway. It's over. We know what you did. You try and kill her to clear your son's reputation." The doctor's face paled slightly, but he quickly recovered. "Those are serious accusations, Mr. Carter. I hope you have proof to back them up, or you could find yourself facing a very expensive lawsuit." Nancy stepped forward, her voice steady despite her obvious nervousness. "We do have proof, Dr. Callaway. We know about Ryan's original toxicology report. We know you altered Jovi's results to protect your son." For a moment, genuine fear flashed in Dr. Callaway's eyes. Then his face twisted into a sneer. "You have no idea what you're dealing with. Do you really think anyone will believe you over me? I'm a respected physician. You're nothing but a troublemaking nurse and a washed-up biker." The doctor's words hung in the corridor for a moment before he continued, his voice dripping with disdain. The crowds were gathering, forming a circle around them. "Face it, Carter. Your kind always ends up on the wrong side of the law. Who do you think the police will believe? The upstanding doctor or the tattooed thug?" Adam's fists clenched at his sides, his entire body trembling with the effort of restraining himself. "My kind," he said, his voice dangerously low. "You mean black people? Is that what this is really about, Callaway? You couldn't stand the idea of your precious son being saved by a black girl, could you?" Dr. Callaway's mask of civility finally cracked. "She ruined everything," he hissed. "My son had a bright future ahead of him. He was going to follow in his grandfather's footsteps, become a senator. And then your little drug addict had to go on date and—" "My daughter is not the drug addict. Your son was speeding under influence and almost caused her life." "I did what I had to do," the doctor continued, his face flushed with anger. "I protected my son. I protected this hospital from another lawsuit from you people. And if that little—" His words were cut off as Adam's massive hand closed around his throat, lifting him off his feet and slamming him against the wall. "You tried to kill my daughter," Adam growled, his voice barely human in its rage. Dr. Callaway's eyes bulged as he struggled to breathe, his feet dangling inches off the ground. Just as it seemed Adam might actually kill the man, Nancy's voice cut through the tension. "Adam, stop," she cried. "Look at the people. We've got him. Everyone's listening. Don't give him another reason to press charge on you." Adam loosened his grip, suddenly noticing how much people had been capturing and recording the scene. Dr. Callaway gasped for air. It was then that he noticed what he had said in front of everyone in the floor. "Well, everyone here listened to every word of your confession, Doctor. You forgot where you were in the heat of the moment, weren't you? It's over, Dr. Callaway. We've got you." The doctor's face drained of all color as the realization of what had just happened sank in. He opened his mouth to speak, but before he could utter a word, the hallway was suddenly filled with chatter and accusations. As if on cue, an alarm began blaring throughout the hospital. Code blue, a patient in cardiac arrest. Adam's blood ran cold as Nancy, pale with worry, muttered, "That's coming from Jovi's wing." Without a second thought, Adam and Nancy raced out of the room, their hearts pounding with fear and dread. The sound of hurried footsteps and frantic voices filled the hallway, but amidst the chaos, Adam caught a glimpse of Dr. Callaway slipping away, heading in the opposite direction. The doctor's face was tight with urgency, but not the kind that came from saving a life. It was the urgency of escape. Adam sprinted after Callaway, his footsteps echoing down the hallway. The doctor glanced back, his expression twisting into one of panic as he realized he was being followed. "Dr. Callaway," Adam barked, his voice like a thunderclap. "Stop right there." Callaway ignored him, pushing through a side door into a quiet corridor. Adam didn't hesitate, shoving the door open and cornering the man near the emergency stairwell. "What the hell are you trying to pull?" Adam demanded, his fists clenched. "What did you do to my daughter?" Callaway's lips curled into a sneer, but before he could respond, Adam grabbed him by the collar. The fight erupted in a flurry of shouts and shoves, Adam's fury driving him to land a punch squarely on the doctor's jaw. Callaway staggered back, clawing at Adam to push him off. "You've lost your mind!" Callaway yelled. "Get your hands off me!" The commotion drew the attention of security guards, who came running down the corridor. "Break it up!" one of them shouted, pulling Adam away from the disheveled doctor. Both men were restrained, their voices overlapping as they hurled accusations at each other. "He's trying to escape," Adam shouted, struggling against the guard's grip. "He's framing my daughter." Callaway, now breathing heavily, tried to regain his composure. "This man attacked me. Arrest him," he spat, though his rattled appearance betrayed his guilt. Once the guards had calmed the situation, Adam wrestled his phone out of his pocket. "You want to settle this? Fine," he growled, dialing the police. "Let's get the law involved and see how you explain yourself against the evidences." As he spoke, his mind churned with the realization that he might finally have a chance to expose the truth about Callaway's scheme. The tension in the air was palpable as they waited for the police to arrive. Adam, still restrained by security guards, kept his eyes fixed on Dr. Callaway, who was attempting to straighten his disheveled appearance and regain his composure. Within minutes, the sound of sirens filled the air. Two police officers, their faces stern and professional, strode into the corridor. "What's the situation here?" the lead officer asked, his gaze sweeping over the scene. Adam spoke up first, his voice steady despite his racing heart. "Officer, I have evidence of this doctor falsifying medical records and endangering patients. He's been tampering with lab results and attempting to frame my daughter for drug use." Dr. Callaway scoffed, his face a mask of indignation. "That's preposterous. This man attacked me without provocation. He's clearly unstable and making wild accusations." The officers exchanged glances before the lead officer spoke again. "Sir," he addressed Adam, "do you have any proof to back up these claims?" Adam nodded vigorously. "Yes, I do. There's a USB drive with the original lab reports. Nurse Nancy can confirm everything." As if on cue, Nancy appeared at the end of the corridor, slightly out of breath. "It's true, officers," she said, stepping forward. "I helped Mr. Carter access the original records. Dr. Callaway has been altering lab results and endangering patients." She looked at Adam. Jovi's stable, we have her back, and there's something you need to know. Jovi's sudden decline, it wasn't natural. They found traces of a powerful sedative in her system, one that wasn't prescribed. The officer's demeanor shifted as they processed this new information. Dr. Callaway, the lead officer said, his tone now more severe, we're going to need you to come with us for questioning. We'll also need to see those records. Callaway's face paled, the reality of his situation sinking in. This is ridiculous, he sputtered. I'm a respected physician. You can't possibly believe... His protests were cut short as the second officer began reading him his rights. Dr. Richard Callaway, you're under arrest for suspicion of medical malpractice and falsification of records. You have the right to remain silent. As Callaway was led away in handcuffs, Adam felt a wave of relief wash over him. The security guards released their hold on him, and he immediately turned to Nancy. Jovi, he said urgently. We need to check on Jovi. Together they rushed to Jovi's room, where the code blue had been called earlier. To their immense relief, they found her stable, surrounded by medical staff who had successfully managed the crisis. Dad, she whispered, her voice hoarse, what happened? Where's Ryan? Adam took his daughter's hand, his eyes welling with tears of relief and exhaustion. It's over, baby, he whispered. We got him. You're safe now. I'll tell you everything once you are stronger. For now, just rest and trust that I'm doing everything I can to make things right. Is Dr. Callaway coming here? Jovi asked softly, her voice tinged with unease. Adam leaned closer, his expression softening as he brushed her hair gently. No, darling. He won't be coming back, I'll make sure of it. Nancy, Adam said suddenly, his tone resolute as he turned to the nurse adjusting Jovi's IV line. I think it's time we go public. We need to expose everything, blow this wide open before they have a chance to bury the truth. Nancy hesitated, her brows furrowing with concern. That's a big risk, Adam. We could be opening ourselves up to lawsuits or even worse consequences. I don't care, Adam replied, his voice firm. My daughter almost died this morning. I'm done playing by their rules. It's time to fight fire with fire. Adam stood, his mind made up. He paced out of the room, pulling his phone from his pocket and dialing a familiar number. When the call connected, his voice was low but brimming with determination. Bones, it's Adam. I need your help again, brother. He wasted no time explaining the situation at the hospital and what had happened to Jovi. This is bigger than me, bigger than any one of us, Adam said, his voice steady and commanding. I need every rider we've got. It's time to raise hell and make some noise. Within hours, the rumble of motorcycles filled the air as hundreds of bikers descended upon the hospital. They lined the streets, their leather jackets emblazoned with club insignias, a sea of chrome and steel stretching as far as the eye could see. The sight was impossible to ignore, and soon news vans began to arrive. Reporters thrust microphones at Adam, who's now outside with the brothers, eager for the story. We're here to demand justice, Adam declared, his voice carrying across the crowd. This hospital allowed racism and corruption to endanger lives. It stops now. As the protest grew, social media exploded with images and videos. The hospital's phone lines were flooded with calls from concerned citizens and angry patients. The administration, caught off guard by the sudden onslaught of negative attention, scrambled to respond. Inside Jovi's hospital room, the television played footage of the protest. Jovi, still weak but recovering, watched with wide eyes as her father's face filled the screen. My dad, she whispered. He did all this for me. Nancy, who stood next to the bed, squeezed her hand gently. For you, dear, and for everyone else who might have suffered if we hadn't spoken up. You two have started something big, she said. As if to confirm her words, a breaking news alert flashed across the TV screen. The hospital's CEO was announcing a full internal investigation and promising sweeping reforms to address the issues of racial bias and medical malpractice. We did that, Jovi said, a note of wonder in her voice. We really made a difference. Adam stood in the doorway, wiping beads of sweat from his temple, his chest rising and falling with the weight of the moment. His eyes were misty with emotion as he looked at Jovi, his voice steady but filled with conviction. That's right, baby. Sometimes all it takes is a few people willing to stand up and say, "This isn't right." He pulled up a chair, joining them in front of the TV. And sometimes, he added, it takes a whole community coming together to support that person. As they watched the coverage of the protest and the hospital's response, a sense of accomplishment settled over the room. They had faced injustice, corruption, and prejudice, and they had emerged victorious. "So what happens now?" Jovi asked, looking between her father and Nancy. Adam's face grew serious. "Now we make sure they follow through. We keep fighting until every patient in this hospital, no matter their race or background, gets the care they deserve." Nancy nodded in agreement. "And we remember that change is possible, even in the face of seemingly insurmountable odds." As the noise of protesters and the rumble of biker engines echoed outside the window and through the TV screen, the three of them sat together in comfortable silence. The tension that had once filled their lives had given way to a quiet sense of unity. They had weathered a storm together and emerged stronger on the other side. Though the road ahead would undoubtedly hold its challenges, they faced it with a renewed sense of hope, determination, and the unshakable bond forged through their shared trials. The story of Jovi Carter, her father Adam, and nurse Nancy would be told for years to come, a testament to the power of standing up for what's right, the strength found in community, and the change that can be sparked by a few brave individuals willing to take a stand.